The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. Welcome. This is our first show back. It's a new year, 2013. We're so thrilled to be here. In just a moment, we are going to be joined by Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and you can ask her questions live. But before we're joined by her, I want to remind all of you that you can participate in this conversation in many different ways. And Emily's starting to cycle through some of the different ways that you can contact us. But I want to remind you, if you want to watch the show live, there's only one place to do that right now, and that's www.autism-live.com. You can go there, and on the desktop, you'll see that there is a place where you can ask a question live. You don't have to log in. Nobody's going to ask for your personal information. There's no credit card thing. It's all free. You just put your cursor in the box, type away, hit enter, and it shows up magically here on the screen. Some of you have already been writing in this morning in anticipation of asking Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh questions. So thrilled to be here with her. And so without further ado, it's time for Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Welcome. It is time for Ask Dr. Doreen. Our special guest, as always on Wednesdays, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. She truly is, I say it in the piece beforehand, a visionary in the field of autism.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate your time being here with us. And we have so many questions that people have written in. I want to get started right away. That somebody wants to know, how did they come up with the number 88, the 1 in 88? For so long we were at 110, then we were at 100, and of course we're referring to the incidence of children on the autism spectrum in the United States. 1 in 88 is the current number that CDC has come out. So where does that come from?
First of all, hi. Happy New Year to all of our viewers too. The number 1 in 88 is actually, when did it come out? About a year ago or something, but it pertains to data, I believe, that goes a couple of years back. So right now, if they were going to measure it, who knows, it could be possibly even higher than that. So by the time we get these numbers out, they're already a few years back. And I believe the numbers are based on states like California, where there is a counting system. In California, obviously, they base it on the numbers from the regional centers or Department of Developmental Disabilities Services. And when you apply to get funding for your child, then that's sort of tagged as a number, and that's how they calculate. And I think most of the data up till now has been based on California, because California is one of the states that does a lot of really good tracking. But the other thing, of course, is that there are some measures of kids in each state, the number of kids in each state, and there are surprisingly certain states that have much higher numbers, like New Jersey. I don't know, there are certain locations that have a higher count. The count is obviously faulty in a number of different ways, because not every child gets services from a funding source that's counting these types of things. But if they are faulty, quite honestly, the error is that they're too low. So in other words, it could be a higher prevalence at this point. So we don't know.
And and as you said, it's always this delay.
Yeah, the delay, right. And I can't remember off the top of my head, the 1 in 88 data could be as old as 2010.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always 2 or 3 years behind. So
yeah, it's shocking.
Yeah, it is.
But you know, I imagine that the reason why we have these numbers is to kind of gauge the direction in which they're going. That, you know, it's not as if the incidences of autism are going down; they're going up.
That's right. Well, I mean, it's for a number of different reasons very, very important to keep track of this. Obviously, you know, if we didn't keep track of this, obviously it would be, autism could have potentially been still as noticed or recognized as it was, let's say, 30 years ago when I got started in this field. And back then, I have to tell you, it was such a low prevalence that it was a very tiny disorder and no funding, no real services or even, you know, any law that would pertain to kids with autism or adults with autism. And the only reason we have, well, there's two reasons really that we have so many resources now. One is the fact that we can see it increasing. And the second is I attribute a lot of it to the organization Autism Speaks, because they have taken this type of data and lobbied for help. And, you know, that's why we have now insurance coverage and awareness and programs and all these different types of things available. It's not as good in other countries. I know that there are different counts when they've done some epidemiological studies in northern European countries like Norway and so on, and they have similar counts. I think at one point I heard that the UK has a higher number actually. But regardless, most of the world, there's not a good count. You know, obviously in the Middle East and like Far East and Africa and so on, or South America, we don't have a tracking system. So they're way, way behind in terms of just getting help.
It seems like 1 or 2 years ago that a study came out for Korea, and I don't remember whether it was Northern or Southern Korea, that the number was shocking. It was like 1 in 48. There was a lot of people saying that it wasn't accurate, but it created a lot of...
Absolutely. There was something really wrong with the study. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember reading it and critiquing it, and there was something pretty invalid about the numbers just due to the way they had done the study. But yeah, I mean, the numbers have been increasing. People often ask me, Shannon, if I think it's just due to improved diagnosis, and there's absolutely no way that it's due to improved diagnosis. A lot of parents are told that the diagnostic criteria changed, and that's why, but that's not the case either. I mean, people don't realize that the DSM-4, which is currently in place, the autism section, the last modification to that was at 1994, and 7 became the training version, but really for a decade or so, almost a decade, we haven't had any kind of change in the diagnostic criteria that would lead to an increased number of kids being diagnosed.
So we've talked about this a little bit before, what do you attribute that increase to?
Right. I mean, you know, for someone like me my entire world has been autism for over 30 years, you know, 30-somewhat years, it's really fascinating to watch a disorder just increase this way. It's pretty unbelievable. And, you know, trying to keep up with all the research, both medical, epidemiological, psychological, behavioral, whatever, all the research that's out there, you look at it and the only explanation could be, because, you know, genetic abnormalities don't develop that fast, so it has to be this combination of a genetic predisposition and environmental factors. And then you look at the environmental factors and you ask yourself, what kind of environmental factor could cause something like this? And really the only answer that I feel very confident in giving is toxins as a whole. And when you look at, you know, of course we're exposed, all of us are exposed to the same toxins. However, we have different ways of detoxifying, different speed of detoxifying. We have different immune systems, all of us. But when you look at the number of toxins in our environment, and because we are exposed to them and use them all the time, we don't even consider them as toxins.
Yeah.
So I'm not even just talking about things like vaccines, which are clearly an intoxicant, but you look at things like plastics, and when we were kids, we didn't have plastics.
Right.
And now, there's nothing that doesn't come in plastic.
Right.
And just water bottles, everywhere.
Yes.
And it's all plastic. And plastics, of course, do produce quite a bit of different types of toxic elements. Then there's all the pesticides in our food, which we gradually sort of get used to. But, hey, we have very, very little healthy bacteria anymore, exposure to healthy bacteria. We really have pretty toxic water supply, pretty toxic food supply. A very large percentage of the food we eat in the U.S. is genetically modified food. So all of those things contribute.
Yeah.
And if you are, in my mind, if you're a child who has a slowed down detox process or redox system, then obviously when you're exposed to these types of things, it's going to affect your brain development.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We went to the ARI conference recently,
that's right.
and I had a conversation with you beforehand where you recommended some specific people that I should go and hear them speak. And it was really wonderful because I've been to ARI conferences before, but I've never had you recommend speakers
the
before.
Specific people are so amazing.
And I have to say that it made it a different experience for me, the talks that I was able to go and hear. And I think, in the future we might ask you for all of our viewers to recommend some things, because just in the things that you were talking about, Dr. Clara Lajonchet was talking about a twin study that showed very clearly, looking at twins, that there has to be some combination of genetics and toxins, because otherwise you would see it was all very clear in the study. And I went to see Dr. Claudia Miller talk about toxins.
She's amazing on both of those people. I mean, Clara has really good data, and Claudia is amazing in terms of just helping you understand what's in our environment.
And as a mom, I have autoimmune issues that I did not know until my child was being diagnosed with autism. And as I meet moms around the world, I keep hearing from them that they have autoimmune issues too. And she was talking about how those kinds of things go hand in hand, that, if we're immune not efficient for whatever reason, and that our child is diagnosed with autism and they're not immune efficient, and things that you could do to make our immune systems work better and their immune systems work better. It was really fascinating stuff.
It is, absolutely.
But I think in the future, maybe when those kinds of conferences are coming up, we might ask you to say, okay, if you were going,
I would go to these talks. Yeah,
exactly,
sure,
because there were so many things to participate in there. And as I said, I've done it before, but it wasn't as...
I mean, a lot of the speakers are fantastic at ARI. I'm so fascinated, and I think it's just an area that I like to learn more and more about.
Me too.
Which is really just how is the environment affecting us. And I think that's, people don't realize that we're not just talking about autism here, we're talking about a lot of chronic illnesses, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, I mean, all these types of illnesses, as well as we're talking about things like, I think I might have had this conversation with you before as well, like infertility, the number of women right now trying to get pregnant and how difficult it has become. This is, all of our biochemistry, our hormones, everything is affected by what we're taking in.
Absolutely. So. And in general, I mean, I think it's just feeling better.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
Especially we think about this at the start of the new year. Everybody wants to feel the absolute best that they can.
Definitely.
And we all should be entitled to that. Okay, moving on to another question here. My son has a difficult time playing with board games and needs so much adult intervention to stay on task. Any recommendations for that when you have to have that adult supervision for playing board games?
I guess without knowing, unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, when I answer appropriately, I don't really know the child. So
absolutely, and thank you for mentioning that. And that's something that I want to remind everybody, that as we're taking in information here from you, there's no way that you could put everything in a sentence that would tell us everything that we need to know. It would be a disservice to your child to think that we could, and we never want to make it seem as though we're giving child-specific information. And you're always very professional professional about that. But there are a lot of things that you tell us
that are general, yeah,
that are so helpful.
I hope so, because like, you know, it's so different per child. And when you look at like this situation, for instance, I don't know, you know, what I would do is I would step back and first of all understand if, like, try to figure out if the child knows the actual steps of the game very well, because if the child doesn't know the steps, in other words, is the adult trying to get the child to attend or trying to get the child to do the steps? And those are two different skills. So I would first try to make sure that the child understands how to play the game step by step on their own, okay? And if we're pretty confident that the child can do that, then you start out with the adult. Essentially, you measure the period of time that the child is able to maintain the game on their own. So what's the child's baseline of it paying attention to this particular game, and you reward that. So if the child is able to, let's say, pay attention for 1 minute, that's great, and you reward that, and you will then increase that time frame, because so the child, the next time you play, you try to get the child to go for 1 minute and 10 seconds, 1 minute and 20 seconds, and that's how you shape it up to playing the duration of the game. You can pretty much use a shaping procedure with reinforcers to kind of you know, have a child or an individual do anything or expand the period of time of anything. But the issue is, keep in mind for this parent, you know, playing games, board games, is supposed to be fun.
Right.
And if the child is losing their attention to the board game, perhaps it's just like, you know, playing a board game is a reinforcer within itself.
Right.
So maybe this is not a type of game that your child is really into. I don't know.
Okay.
That's another thing to consider, is that yes, on the one hand, you want to make sure the skills are there.
Right.
You know, make sure the child can attend to things they're interested in, and then, you know, you want to make sure this is something that's up their alley. This is what they want to do.
And I would imagine, because there are so many different reasons. What I remember when they were working with my son and they would play board games, there were at different times they were working on different skills.
Yes, absolutely.
And they were always trying to make it reinforcing, but early on, they were trying to teach him, you know, how to follow rules, how to take turns, how to make socially
of the game?
How to make socially relevant comments for conversation during the game, how to lie, you know, tell the white lies. There were different things along the way, and so my question is, what point are you at right there with the board games? You know, what is it that you're trying to work on? And and as you brought up, you know, if you're just working on attending, maybe that's the thing you focus on, but finding something that's reinforcing.
And see, that's the thing, Shannon, is like most of the time what happens, and that is pretty similar to also what happens with our kids in school when they have a shadow.
Yeah.
We end up, when we have an aide or an adult or someone working with a child, a lot of times what happens is the aide or adult is trying to teach the child almost everything all at once.
Right.
It's like, you know, pay attention, and this is what you're supposed to do, and look, it's your turn now, and say something social to these people, and take your turn, and remember, you want to win, and it's just too many things.
Yeah.
And so the concept really is, the only way you can be successful with this is make sure the child is really fluent on all aspects of the actual game itself.
Yeah.
And then make sure the child is able to do all the things that are required in playing a game. So, you know, taking turns, understand what their objective is, able to lose or win, all of that sort of stuff.
Yes.
And then able to attend, because otherwise you will always have the adult prompting continuously.
Well, you just described me parenting. As a former teacher, I understand the concept of teaching somebody something, and you don't try to teach everything all at once. You teach one thing at a time. But as a parent, I do that. I want my child to be able to do everything in the moment, and I will, you know, pick at him.
Right.
It's
exactly.
not good. It's not the way. I know it's not the way to teach things, and yet in the moment, I succumb, like so many people, I would imagine. Okay, we have another question here. What kinds of services, if any, are available for adults on the spectrum that are high functioning? I'm not in the California area like you are. I'm on the other side of the country in Cincinnati, Ohio, and it seems as if the only services for autistic adults are limited to those that are severely low functioning. And I would imagine, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this, but we hear this a lot.
Yes.
And that, you know, I think that we're very fortunate in California, but I think that Ohio is not the only place that does not have enough services for high-functioning adults, or adults in general.
In general.
On the spectrum.
And to be honest, I'm not sure I would be able to recommend something even in California, if you were in California. This is probably the biggest guilt trip I go through, because we don't have, there aren't, I mean, throughout the country, there are not enough programs, there are very, very few, that can address the issues of adults, and particularly adults that are high functioning. Here in California, the HELP group is pretty terrific with that. They have several programs for adults and teenagers and, you know, higher level
You know who else I
individuals.
love here in California is Joey Travolta's
absolutely.
inclusion films.
Yes, definitely.
It's brilliant.
Definitely.
And he actually takes it in small workshops and travels around the country.
Absolutely.
So if there's an opportunity for him to be in the Ohio area and you see that,
they're terrific things.
Oh, we just hear amazing things that come out of that.
But you know, the thing is that the problem is, I guess, that adults or adolescents with very high functioning autism or Asperger's or PDD have made it through this far, sort of without a lot of service, and therefore when they get to a certain age and they start hitting a lot of problems, people don't know what to do, where to go, how to handle it. We have, and I think I might have talked to you about this earlier as well, we have a pretty, I would say over the last couple of years, just maybe 2 or 3 years, and I think that's just because the prevalence of autism started increasing, you know, 20 years ago, and now those kids are hitting us. Sort of the baby boom generation of autism is now coming to us in the form of adolescents and adults as well. And the high functioning adolescents and adults, there's 2 major areas of concern. One is they become depressed and anxious, and that really concerns me, because you know, psychotherapy can help them obviously, but it has to be done in a very different way. The issues that these adults and adolescents go through have to do more with just not being quite able to fit in, not understanding what's expected of them socially, not being able to cope with all the social demands, those types of things. Very similar to what all teenagers go through, you know, very similar stuff, just a little bit more because it's harder for them.
Sure.
And the other area is we seriously don't have good training programs for vocational skills or all of the skills that are necessary for these individuals to actually find a job. And then the connection to employment, you know, that sort of thing. So there are people in this world, you know, like yourself, who take their experience of autism and turn it into something positive for others. And one of those people is a gentleman, Lou Vismara, and he was one of the founders, together with another gentleman who I respect very much as well, Rick Rollins, and both of them, they were fathers who were part of a group of 4 fathers who helped found the Mind Institute up in Northern California. And so those individuals, their kids have now reached adult age. And of course they are amazing people, and Dr. Vismara, of course, is very involved with the Senate as well in California. And so one of the things that they're pushing for this year, I know Lou is to start developing classrooms for teenage level, or, you know, 17, 18, 19, so on, where they learn vocational skills, as well as where we can infuse as much technology as possible to help teach them. Because really, I think the vision they have, or Lou has, is to try to use technology to teach adolescents and adults as much as possible all over the country, ultimately. So we're hoping to be able to pilot a program with them in Sacramento, and then to try to develop some programs. This is, I just wrote out my sort of, I think 5 or 6 goals for this year, and the development of our Card 2 program is what we call it for adults, is one of the priorities this year, because we do have a lot of adults at CARD. We do work with them. We do have a developed curriculum for them already. We just haven't gotten it online yet, sort of like skills. And working with high-functioning adults and adolescents takes you from a pure behavioral. You're not so much in the realm of pure behavioral anymore, and it's sort of like a mix of ABA and cognitive psychology, and then it really goes into things like job training and so on and so forth. But it's a massive curriculum. I mean, if you think you've seen skills, you know how big that is.
Yes.
CARD 2 curriculum is major as well.
Wow.
And those types of skills are pretty easy to teach. Most of the time with our adults, we have two things going on. One is they have never really, if they're more affected, let's say by autism, they've never really learned how to communicate well or communicate their needs well. So they have behaviors. And people tend to be very afraid of them when they have behaviors, because they're pretty big people now, they're grown-ups. But once you teach them communication skills, all of a sudden you have a whole different thing. You're not dealing with a child anymore. You have an adult who's now all of a sudden open to just receiving, and a lot easier to work with in a million different ways. And then there's 1,000 things, like whether it's an adult at the level where all you want to really teach them is a vocational skill, or it's an adult at the level where you teach them how to cope with college and how to actually find a job, make a resume, balance their checkbook, all those, access public transport, all of the things, we do all of it. And so, I haven't helped this person because I don't really know very good programs. We do have a list of some of the ones that we consider good. There are some programs in the Northeast, sort of upper New York and Connecticut and so on. So I guess what I would say is if the person who wrote in needs help on this issue, I would suggest you actually send us an email. And then we will correspond with you directly and give you some of our recommendations for your child. Or adult.
Right, absolutely. But I'm excited then for the CARD 2 curriculum.
We really want to develop that. I'm going to assign one of our senior supervisors just to that project this year.
Very cool. I was going to take one more question, but why don't we take a short break, and then we'll come back with more of your questions. We're working our way down the list, so keep those questions coming in. We'll be right back.
Every child with autism deserves a bright future.
Without further clarification, the Affordable Care Act could actually result in less benefits for individuals with autism spectrum disorders.
We urge Catherine Sebelius to clarify the Affordable Health Care Act.
She can make one change, one little minor change, to make applied behavioral analysis be part of the health care plan.
By signing this petition, you are protecting the health care benefits of individuals with autism spectrum disorders.
We need to make sure
that we are heard
and seen.
Sign a petition at autism-live.com.
Here's how you can show your infinite support. Create your own infinity ribbon. What you're going to do is take a ribbon that's been cut about 8 inches long, and you're going to grab one end and then twist it, and then take the two ends and join them together, and then tape it together. And then I'm going to flip it around and take another piece of tape, and what I have is double-sided sticky tape. Squeeze down. You have your very own infinity ribbon.
With ABA,
the possibilities are infinite.
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 With ABA,
the possibilities are infinite. With ABA,
The possibilities are infinite. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We are here right now with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, truly a visionary in the field of autism. Always such a thrill to have you here. And those of you who are watching us live on www.autism-live.com are writing in with a lot of questions. We're loving that. We're going to get through as many of them as we can, and then we keep a list of the ones we don't get through, so don't get discouraged. We will get to them. We had a couple of different questions about diet, and in particular the GFCFSF GFCFSF diet. I'm going to mention, by the way, that a little bit later on today at 11:15, we're debuting another in a series of videos that we're doing about the GFCFSF diet. Today, they're doing macaroni and cheese, and it's the most amazing recipe. My son is now addicted to it, so that'll be at 11:15, and that is with the founder of Taka, Lisa Ackerman. She's been doing these videos for us, and she's an amazing cook. But GFCFSF, which stands for gluten-free, casein-free, now soy-free. And somebody wants to know, going to start the GFCFSF diet, what do you recommend I do first? Do you recommend that they do one at a time?
Yeah,
or?
That's pretty easy. Yeah, I think and I'm not sure what exposure the child has to soy. The fourth one, by the way, that most people do is corn.
Yeah.
But what I would do is I would start with casein. I would assume that soy is limited in your child's diet, so that would be an easy one to eliminate. So you might potentially want to get rid of the soy. This is on the case that if it's just soy milk that they're drinking. I'm not sure what their exposure is, because soy could be also providing protein to the child. I don't know. But in this case, if it's just a small exposure currently of soy, then I would get rid of soy and casein at the same time.
Okay.
If it's a very large exposure to soy, and also soy is not very good. If it's a boy, I don't know, you should just get off soy anyway.
Right.
So soy will increase estrogen levels as well. So generally speaking, what I tell people is start with casein, get rid of casein, and that takes about 3 weeks or so to really have the full effect of it. And you'll know, because if your child doesn't change in terms of their energy level or calmness, if you don't see like these rings that I always have, you know,
and me as well.
When you see a child with dark rings, the very first thing is let's get rid of milk.
Okay.
So if you can eliminate the casein, and I'll talk about that momentarily because that's pretty easy. You can replace this with a number of things. First of all, your child really doesn't need milk. Your child needs calcium.
Right.
And so you can replace it if you want with other forms of milk. I mean, like camel milk, if you can find it, coconut milk, even rice milk. And rice milk, of course, then you have to think about things like constipation, or does the child have pretty regular GI tract? If not, then you don't want to go to rice milk. But there are other almond milk. It depends on other allergies and other situations. So you get rid of casein, you wait 3 weeks. If you don't see much of a change, I think the best way to test it is just give your child a glass of milk.
Right. And
after
see what
3
happens.
weeks. Oh yeah, because sometimes I'll tell people that just at an intake, because I'll see like really dark rings or something, they'll go home and stop milk, and about 3 days later they'll call me and say, oh my God, we have a different child. And sometimes it just works instantly, and sometimes you don't see it until you actually give the child another glass of milk or an infraction, and all of a sudden the child's out of control, or just dazed, completely out of it.
Checked out, yeah.
Right, checked
absolutely.
out. So milk is pretty much, or casein as a whole is the first one, and then gluten. Gluten takes a little bit longer to see any kind of thing, and it's not as much of a drastic change in behavior as it is in bowel movement, rashes. Those types of things tend to be affected much more by gluten.
Right.
In general, you know, I always find it kind of interesting because the first genetically modified food in the U.S. was wheat. Long time ago. And that was done just so that we could produce more food for third world countries and so on. And so really eliminating gluten is probably one of the healthiest things we can do for ourselves.
Right.
I generally never really give my kids milk anyway. I never did.
Right.
But it's hard to stay away from gluten because pretty much any bread product or, you know, lots of products have gluten. But these days, oh my gosh, I mean, anywhere you go, you even go to a coffee shop and they have gluten-free everything.
It's very exciting.
It's unbelievable. It's just amazing. And it always fascinates me, Shannon, because we go through these cycles in just the world, you know, where we produce things that are destructive, and then we start to produce things that will overcome the destruction we've done to ourselves.
Yes, absolutely.
So we're doing that again with gluten now. It's funny. But yeah, I really recommend lowering those. You know, and again, not for every child.
Right.
It's easy to test for if you want to do tests ahead of time, but if you don't, it's easy to see the changes. And when you do casein, and a lot of people are concerned about the whole process of what about calcium?
Right.
You know, what I did, and it's very easy all over the country, any pharmacy, any just like drugstore, you know, Save-On, whatever, Rite Aid, you go and request liquid calcium, and they will order you a bottle of calcium, which is mixed with some orange flavor, which is absolutely delicious. And it's like a spoon of that will give your child 3 times as much calcium as they would get from milk anyway.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
But again, not necessarily for every child, but for
absolutely.
For what I hear from parents is that there's only 3 different reactions when they do GFCF. There are parents who say huge difference in behavior. Parents who say we really didn't see something in behavior, but that, you know, we did it for 6 months to 2 years. Our child was a little bit healthier. Wasn't a big deal. And then there are parents who say, I saw nothing, and after a period of time, we went off of it and went back to our regular diet.
That's right.
That there's no harm, no foul, you know.
Right. I mean, the whole concept, you have to understand how this whole thing actually comes about. Like, why are we doing a GFCF diet, you know? So the original concept comes from the idea that, hey, we have, or some of our kids have what's, I guess in lay terms, called the leaky gut.
Right.
And where does this come from? So like one of the cycles that it comes from is just, you know, your child is very young, has a lot of ear infections, right? And you go to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician gives you antibiotics.
Right.
Okay. Fair enough. Your child gets better from the ear infections eventually, but sometimes, to be honest, I'm shocked at the number of antibiotics that a small child is given. It's better now, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So what happens is the bacterial infection that was causing the ear infection, let's say, is gone, but at the same time, all the healthy bacteria is gone as well. We have a lot of bacteria that's necessary in our gut for us to be able to digest food. And so all of that's gone as well. And so when all that's gone, your child is now not really able to digest the food in a way that they can break down the peptide. So when you eat a protein, it breaks down to a peptide, which is kind of a chain of amino acids. And that then further breaks down to amino acids, and those individual amino acids are what then give you nutrition, okay? That doesn't happen completely. The process isn't completed with a lot of children. And if that isn't completed, those chains of amino acids, those peptide chains, tend to go through the blood-brain barrier and have an effect on the child of an endorphin. So they will make the child feel kind of dazed and out of it, and sort of maybe in some cases just giggly, or just not able to concentrate, not able to focus, all of that. And so that, when studies were done very early on, and this was not just autism, but the 2 primary food products where the peptides were difficult to break down were gluten and casein.
Yeah.
And that's why the idea came that, hey, we should, and this, I have to really go back and say, for me, the first person that I feel contributed hugely to this was Karen Surusi, who was a mom. And I think Karen is still in Norway. She was amazing.
Yes.
And she did this way back when nobody was even thinking about this. She really, truly changed the field in that sense, and should be credited more, I think, for this. And did this with her own son, and started a diet free of casein and gluten, and wrote about it, and it was a pretty tremendous change. And then scientists started going back and looking and saying, oh, this is what's happening. He's not being exposed to those peptides that are, you know, they're basically leaking, but they're not really leaking. It's just that they're not breaking down, and therefore they're having an endorphin effect.
Yeah.
And so that's where the whole thing started. Later we realized, oh, hey, anything that you are sort of, it's it's not allergic to, but anything that raises your immune response. So could be soy for a lot of kids, could be corn, could be a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
And often I say we take for granted how important it is to identify those things.
Yes.
They make a very, very big difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So an interesting thing to try, and again at 11:15 we're going to have a new recipe. I know somebody had written in that they are looking for a casein-free cheese, and the meal that Lisa's going to show us how to prepare a little bit later at 11:15 is macaroni and cheese, and it's really, I have to admit, it's really fabulous.
Amazing.
And I was a huge skeptic. It's fabulous. Even Emily, who I call our Martha Stewart / MacGyver, who is not on a GFCF diet, tasted it and said that's really good.
That's amazing. What did she use? Do you know? What is
it's a rice pasta, but she uses a butternut squash soup that's absolutely amazing on its own. I'm now addicted to it. And there's a new kind of cheese that's out that I believe the correct pronunciation for it is Daya.
Okay.
And it comes in lots. It melts. It needs a little help to melt.
So you mix it with the butternuts?
You mix it with the butternut squash, and it looks like regular macaroni and cheese, and it tastes like it, just a little bit sweeter.
Amazing.
Amazing. It's really tasty, I have to admit. And I was certain that there was not going to be, there are so many things that our family is allergic to and that my son can't have and that I can't have. And I said, I'm sure, when Lisa was describing it to me and said it was heavenly, I said, Lisa, I'm sure we can't have it. I was just absolutely 100% positive. And she said, no, Shannon, you can.
Of course, it's Lisa Heckerman. She comes up with these brilliant ideas.
Exactly. And I was 100% sure, and I admit shamed face that, you know, I was just no from the beginning. It's fabulous, and we can have it. It's amazing. It's life-changing, especially if you have kids that you're a GFCFSF with. So we will have that later on. And we're going to get to this a little bit later. Okay, here is this huge open-end question, but what is autism spectrum disorder?
Okay. How much time do I have?
Yes, exactly. How many days can we set aside for that?
I'll try to be very quick on this one. Okay, so autism spectrum disorder is part of the diagnosis is established in a book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Currently, we're on what's called the DSM-4R revised. I believe the DSM-5 is supposed to come out this year. We'll wait and see what happens with that. The DSM-4 criteria for a diagnosis is there are certain chapters. There's one, a section for children. When you look at childhood disorders, and then there's a section called PDDs, or pervasive developmental disorders. PDDs are disorders that involve more than one area of deficit. So like you might have a child who has anxiety disorder, that would be different because it's one area you're focused on. The PDDs, you're focusing on more than one area, and they include autism, which is actually called autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, which is PDD-NOS. There's Rett's disorder, which is actually now being completely taken out because it is a genetic component disorder or identified. And then there was another category that was called disintegrative disorder, which none of us really used. It's a form of autism that's regressive. There's so many children that have regressive autism that there was no point in using the category, so I think it's being removed. So the main three to focus on are autistic disorder, Asperger's, and PDD-NOS. The quick version of what that is you look at it, you evaluate a child, and you look and say, okay, there are deficits or aberrations, differences in three areas of functioning: social behavior, communication, and what we call stereotypic repetitive behaviors that have no function. If a child has two symptoms in the social behavior areas, deficits. So for instance, they don't socialize with other people appropriately, they don't give, let's say, they don't interact with their peers, they won't come and try to get your attention when it's appropriate, they don't have empathy, those types of social behaviors, those would classify as symptoms in that area. And then the child would have to have one in the communication area, so something like they don't have eye contact, they don't have language, they don't know how to talk with their peers, whatever. And then one in the area of stereotypical behaviors. So let's say the child is extremely rigid in terms of their routines. They line up their toys. They, you know, repeatedly turn on and off lights. Things that don't have much of a function. There's no reason to really do these things, but the child insists on doing them.
Right.
So that adds up to 4. 2 in social, 1 in communication, 1 in stereotypy. And if you have 2 more in any of those 3, and your total is 6 or more, then you get a diagnosis of autistic disorder. If your total is less than 6, then let's say that you don't have the classic 4. So you have, let's say, 1 in social deficit, 1 communication deficit, and 1 type of stereotypy, or no stereotypies, but, you know, and it doesn't add up to the right formula, then your diagnosis is PDD-NOS, which means it's a milder form of autism. And if you don't really have the delay or aberrations in the communication area, so you can speak and communicate with people, but you're socially odd, or have behaviors in the social area, and you do have a little bit of the obsessive types of things, then your diagnosis becomes Asperger's. And that's a very, very simplified version of what the spectrum is. None of it really means all that much, to be honest with you, because it's important for the purpose of diagnosis is important for various things. Of course, we need to focus the intervention, know what types of things work or don't work, get funding. I mean, all of that is based on diagnosis. But more importantly, I think what I always say is forget about the label and focus more on the exact symptoms of the child. You know, what causes the child to do these stereotypical behaviors, which is one of the symptoms. And if you can identify, okay, my child is acting a little OCD or obsessive compulsive, then look at, hey, OCD is one of the anxiety disorders. Maybe he feels anxious. Maybe he feels anxious because he doesn't have language. He can't communicate. Maybe he feels a little bit scared of his environment. Maybe the sensory stimulation in his environment is a little too high, and that's what's causing him to be anxious, and that's what's causing him to put his head down and line objects up all the time. So it's kind of like, if you can understand the process, it's much more important than understanding the diagnosis.
Yeah. I will say that as a parent early on, I was so overwhelmed by the diagnosis and what did it mean, and trying to figure out what it meant. And I remember in the moment that the doctor said to me autism, that I thought I knew enough to, what the first words that I came out was, I said, well, but it would be Asperger's, right? Because I was thinking, well, that means, you know, higher, which sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But, you know, those were my first words when she said autism, and she said no. But I guess for me, and I hear this from a lot of parents, I needed to have the classification because I thought that was going to help me to go find what was going to be the answer. And now, further along, it seems to me that what I would have loved in that moment was if she had said, run and go do ABA. It doesn't matter which one of these categories, run and go do ABA, because ABA is going to be effective no matter what. Well, yes, if you do the right type of ABA. Okay. Because, like, you know, when you talk about ABA in general, of course, is a technique. And that is going to be effective with everyone. Right. Just no matter what the diagnosis is. Whether it's depression, anxiety, suicidal behavior, autism, it doesn't matter. ABA is generally effective. It's incredibly effective. But the content, when you're using these techniques, what you're actually teaching a child with autism is going to be very different from what you're teaching a child with Asperger's. And that, I think, is still something that our field needs to learn a lot more about. Because, you know, generally speaking, board-certified behavior analysts will be doing a lot more basic stuff which doesn't pertain to higher functioning kids. We just, you know, you have had Jonathan on this show a lot of times, I think. Jonathan Tarbox, Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, who's in charge of our research here at CARD. He has really taken a very significant interest in using ABA techniques to teach cognitive skills, executive functioning skills. Several of our PhD level staff have actually really gone into the area of, you know, can we teach executive functioning skills and cognition and so on, and they've been very successful. And I think that's where we start to mash with cognitive psychology. It's sort of a merging of a behavioral into cognitive behavioral. And that's much more relevant. You would never sit with a
Asperger's child, for instance, and say, you know, touch apple.
Right.
Right? You'd be teaching them things like how to identify inferences.
Right.
Those types of things. So the content becomes critical.
Yeah.
And you're right, as a parent, when you hear the label autism, it's just scary.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh my God, autism, isn't that lifelong? I think that's the first thing. Doesn't that mean my child has retardation? All of those things are just not true. None of it is true. So having autism really doesn't mean that your child's always going to have autism. It means that your child has a number of different issues going on right now, and as I've said before, for me, it's just like anything else. Break it down to what's my child's biology? Can I stabilize? Can I help my child get all the nutrition he needs, sleep well, not get ill? Can I help adjust some of his sensory needs? That seems to be an area that we need to still develop a lot of. That's another one I should put on my list for this year. And then can we teach him all the things he needs?
Yeah.
And that's really a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I really keep saying that to parents because you have to overcome the fear of the diagnosis. You have to overcome the fear. You have to maintain hope, because if you just fear, you're going to freeze, or you're going to go into depression or a million other things. And the truth is, every single child gets better. How much better? Just you don't know, because the children are so differently impacted by this. But every single child gets better, and it's not as scary as you think in the end.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you just made me realize that in that moment that she said autism to me, I had like the chalkboard in my head of what my child's life was going to be like, and
we're done.
You know, there were all these question marks about, well, which college will he go to, and you know, who will he end up with a lifelong partner, and all these different things, and what will he do for a job. There were all those question marks, but there was no question that he was going to progress. And when she said autism, it was as though that board got wiped clean,
shattered,
and it was a big question mark about what will happen and will there be any progress. And in that moment, I didn't know that there would be progress.
It's unbelievable.
And to know, if I'd had the opportunity in that moment to sit down with someone like you, to hear the words, all of these kids will progress.
Absolutely. All of our kids progress. But you know, I can't even pretend to imagine, Shannon, like when you were told that your child's, like when everything you envisioned is all of a sudden shattered. How do you suddenly start to rebuild that? I guess it's an interesting thing, because personally, one of the things I go through in life is just learning to trust the universe. You know, learning to trust where I'm going is where I'm supposed to go. And I think that parents of children with autism are somewhere higher up, because the universe gives you that experience, I suppose, which I call opportunity, sooner. I mean, you really, when your future is all of a sudden non-existent as you imagined it, you really do have to trust the universe. You really have to say, okay, it's not what I thought, but it's going to be fine, because this is the best thing for me, this is the best thing, we're going to make this good. And that is just an incredible lesson. That's just an amazing thing.
Well, and we're, in just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Nancy Osbaugh-Jackson. She comes in to do Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy on Wednesdays with me for the second hour, and she's an amazing person, and she talks about how sometimes these things are an opportunity to grow, and that
everything,
you know,
everything is, absolutely,
and that when you know, in the beginning on the first day, you cannot be in that moment, you cannot see it that way, but that after a period of time that something happens and you realize, okay, I have two ways of looking at this, and how am I going to do it? And Nancy speaks very eloquently to that. But I I do see that I'm far enough along, and I try to share with other parents that that moment does come.
It does
and
come.
that good things can come of this. But I also see now, when we went to Nancy and I went to the LA Autism Walk this year, and it was amazing for us from the generation of 10 years ago of having children diagnosed to now, how different it is. There was a woman who was at the walk who had her 2.5-year-old with her, who had been diagnosed at 2 and who had already started ABA at 2.5. And she was about 4 months in from diagnosis. Child already had a full program and was already making tremendous progress, and she was at her first walk. And Nancy and I hugged her and said, "Oh my goodness, like you have done what took us years.
You hit the ground running."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said, "It's because people told me. I had the information."
It's because of people like you and Nancy that there are parents who are able to move faster.
I know that's Nancy and I. A lot of our waking time is spent. You know, I always say here, if I can save you 5 minutes and $5, I did my job today. And hopefully a lot more than that. But important to get the right information as early as possible.
Absolutely.
And that what you said about hope, that there is so much hope.
Yeah.
I would have loved that on my first day.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to take this question about medication? There's a do you want to field that today? Okay. My son is 24 with severe autism, nonverbal. His behavior is really erratic, and he is taking, and I'm going to mess up the pronunciation of these, risperidone, Xanax, ER, and clonidine. Clonidine.
What was the one before clonidine?
Xanax, but they said Xanax ER. And still awake most of the night. What else can I do to make him sleep well?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it's about medicines, and
so I'm cautious when I give my opinion about medication, and this is really just based on my experience, but you really should be, I assume he is under the care of a physician who's prescribed all of these medications. If you are under those medications, I mean particularly Xanax, of course, and you're still having difficulty sleeping, you can't keep adding clonidine. I mean, you have so many medications there, and if he's still not sleeping, there has to be something else that's going on that's waking him. I'm not sure. When you say sleep disorders are pretty serious. We're very dysfunctional when we don't sleep, and people don't pay enough attention to that. My suggestion would be, please go to a sleep clinic, first of all. I mean, UCLA has an awesome program. A lot of the universities do, where they will, if you haven't already, where they will do a 24-hour EEG to see what's going on during your adult child's sleep. And this was a 24-year-old. So you really need to look at those things, because there could be subclinical seizures going on. There's a million other things. The individual could be experiencing pain, GI-type pain. Abnormal brain activity of any kind will wake you up and cause that sort of problem. Or it could be behavioral, which of course is a possibility as well. So all of those types of things need to be checked out. I really, I mean, I can't say this to you because you have a 24-year-old and on pretty serious doses of medications that are really would knock you out, like so, and he's still not sleeping. But I'm of the mind that if you're not sleeping, there's something wrong. And these types of medications, they kind of function like other, pain medication, let's say. Pain medication, all you're doing is really numbing the symptoms. You're not really fixing what's causing it. You're just trying to, okay, well, I can't sleep, but let me just put something in there that's going to make me drowsy. And for me, it's a little bit more, why don't you try to figure out what is actually causing it? And perhaps at the age that he is, you already have, and everything I'm saying to you is just very elementary, and I apologize if that's the case, because I find that most of the time with our adults, who are still having problems. The parent has just tried a billion things.
Sure.
And that's why I'm saying, you know, that would be your expertise, could potentially be beyond mine in that area. But what I do with my younger folks who are not sleeping is really go more into melatonin. And I don't mean just melatonin, because I hate melatonin on its own, but melatonin with tryptophan 5-HTP combination usually tends to work very, very well. Having said that, you know, it's ludicrous to think that you can go from a combination of clonidine and Xanax to melatonin.
Right.
It's such a huge difference in what you're doing. But we do build tolerance to medications, and I don't know how long your son has been on these medications, but if you don't try to do whatever you can to get him off, the dosage will just keep going up, and it'll get to a point where it's just not healthy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So potentially looking to see deeper if there's other things going, because there's got to be other
Sleep
things
clinic,
at some
for
point
sure.
going on. Okay.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I didn't realize we're out of time, and we have a bunch more questions, but we do keep them in the mix, and we'll continue to whittle away at them. So appreciate all of your questions and comments, and I so appreciate all of your answers.
My pleasure. It's always lovely to be here. And
it's always a treat.
I feel bad because we have so many questions from the past as well, and there's more coming in. I'm thinking maybe I should start answering some of them on Facebook. We'll see how we can.
Yeah, maybe we can.
We can do some of that.
Okay, but thank you all for being with us. We're gonna and thank you, Dr. Granpeesheh, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
And we're gonna take a short break, and when we come back, we're gonna be joined by Nancy Allspaw Jackson. She's here to do Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and we have a special guest today. Doug Baker is going to be talking with us about getting prepared for our children long term. I think we're going to talk about conservatorship and also preparing financially for the time when we're not here. I know it's the scariest thing to talk about, but it's something that we need to look at. It's the beginning of the year. I know a lot of you have made resolutions, and that might be one of them. And we have that and some important in the news to share with you as well. So stick with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
If you're going to describe like ABA to another parent, what would it be?
The whole point of ABA is that you teach him how to teach himself. And I don't know that is necessarily, I guess I didn't realize that was supposed to happen from the beginning. I thought that now it was all a lot of work with him, and then later he would start to figure out how to do it for himself, but he's already doing it. And you know, repetition is the underlying thing, because for, I think, young kids in general, but certainly with kids with autism, it takes them a little more time.
Touch car. No, try again. Try again, okay? Okay. Last one. Touch car. Yeah, touch it though. Touch car. Good, what is it? What is this? What is this? Yes, car, okay.
And I don't think we completely appreciate how much work he's doing to learn, because it's normal for us too. I mean, this is what he has to do to learn these things, so it's now become normal for us.
It's still hard to sit out here and listen to the monitor and hear them repeatedly ask him to do something where he's upset and he's crying, but it always works out. It's reminder of just don't give up, because he always eventually accomplishes what they're asking, and then I hear the reward. I hear him jumping up and down and them cheering.
You have the monitor, so you know what's happening. Does that make a huge difference for you?
I like to know. It was hard at first to hear him, have a problem.
Yeah, it's easy when he's doing great to have the monitor. It's hard when he's struggling and crying.
And in the beginning, it was hard too, because.
Well, I always thought at the beginning, should I go help?
That's how we did it, because we had speech therapy and occupational therapy to start with, and if he cried, then we made it better, and we were encouraged to make it better. If he was crying with the speech therapist, something wasn't right. It was different when ABA started. Crying was sort of part of the game.
Yeah, I met a guy who at not an ABA thing, orientation that basically told me ABA, yeah, they're paid to piss your kid off. So I tried to remember that. They're paid to piss him off.
Right, when he noticed one day, like, he was really pissed off, and that was because he wanted to poop. And,
yeah, you know? that was actually a rough day for us, because we felt like we'd abused him almost. That we really.
I mean, I got what she was trying to do with him. I understood that he wasn't being compliant, but then once we realized what it was that he wanted, it was just
he just wanted a moment to go sit in a corner, and like us adults, we would say see ya, but no.
Well, and I took him back, and when I was changing him, the whole conversation he and I had was, all you have to do is tell us, and I had him repeat 4 or 5 times.
Yeah, that was a bad day though for us, because we felt like we had let him down.
Well, and
do you think? Yeah,
and how and I've thought about it probably a dozen times.
He must have been miserable. He was really upset, and.
But would it have been the right thing for us to rescue him and be like, what, can we just let him go? And I don't know what the right answer is.
Well, we didn't think of it, and they didn't think of it.
We didn't know.
We didn't know what he was trying to do, and
we didn't know if he was just being ornery or if.
but it's a thought now. That's as hard as he'd fought anything for a long time.
I sat there even thinking that it's like, it's hard, and it's somebody else's kid, and mom and dad are sitting right here. And he's screaming, and she had to keep doing it to show him what it was that she wanted him to do.
Yeah.
And, that's not easy, and I respect that.
Yeah, she had a hard time, I'm sure. It's got to enter their mind that mom and dad are right here, and I'm pushing him so hard that he's I almost heard a couple 4-letter words from a kid who doesn't talk really. But
that was good for us to see, too, that it's like, because we don't know how far to push him when he's behaving.
But we also have to remember that we're the parents, and that maybe there's something else going on. That's a lesson there for us. Is that maybe we should have next time.
We've even acted differently since then. That if we see him going into the corner, we're trying to give him words, to tell us what it is that he's doing, so that the next time something like that happens, if he needs a minute, that he.
Yeah, I never thought I'd have this conversation, but you just. Jack, can you just say poop? I'm pooping. Can you say that? And it's, that would never happen again if he gets that skill. That would never happen again. Daddy, you gotta poop, or daddy poop, or whatever. Mommy poop.
Like kids.
He's getting there.
Kids do, and he's
learning.
He's definitely learning the value of words.
Yes, he is. He's learning that he gets not necessarily everything he wants. He gains from his vocabulary now. He gains specifics.
How about you guys? Like, you talk about how he's adjusting and getting there. How have you guys been adjusting to diagnosis, the therapy, the 30 hours over top of your 30 hours?
We're good.
It's all good.
No. I'm just physically tired. Other than that. Strangers that used to come into our house are now friends. It's not the same thing.
And I think it's become our normal. I don't think we would be, we'd be sad for obvious reasons if it ended, because we want our son to get all the help that he can get. But yeah, to have a week without people coming in, I think would be like really cool.
We'd be okay with it. But having said that, we love everybody that comes into our house.
And it just is what it is, and we see such progress in him that I don't think the inclination to be free is strong enough to override the inclination to continue to watch his progress.
Yeah.
On the flip side of that, if we're being completely honest, and this is the hard part of the honest part, but they help us. We've gotten, great advice, and if we have issues, we can ask, and we have somebody to ask every single day, and that's all good. But on the flip side, there are definitely the days too where it's like, do we do anything right?
Yeah, there's days where
there's too many suggestions where it's like
suggestions are, it's easy to suggest when you spend 2 hours or 3 hours with somebody and go home or go to another child. Well, I got him for the next 21 hours too after you leave. Sometimes there's too many suggestions, and they don't mean anything negative.
No, I mean, some of the suggestions, even if you roll your eyes and when you first get it, like, pause this movie and see if he'll take a bite. Yeah, right, sure he will. And then he does.
Yeah.
So we've learned enough,
which
too.
Which kind of pisses you off.
It's like, wait a minute. It
kind of pisses me off when they're right all the time.
But I did the pausing.
Yeah, I paused it.
I did it.
You didn't pause it. I did. And every once in a while we'll whisper under our breath, really. And then it works usually. So it's just a defense mechanism, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, or we feel like Jack, I think, sometimes too, that we've lost a lot of control of our world these days.
I'm enjoying him much more because he's not as scary to me. As I learn more about autism and about his steps forward, it's less intimidating to me. As we get more skills on how to deal with the rough times, it's less intimidating to me. And I pick him up, he puts his head on my shoulder for 25 seconds, and that's like my favorite 25 seconds. And then of course he looks around and then I put him down, but for 25 seconds he just puts his head here, which he doesn't always do. Lately he's been doing it a lot. I like that.
Absolutely.
Very good, very good. That's good.
Yeah?
Yeah. You get it? No.
Okay. How old are you?
12.
Just checking.
I told you.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Good mid-morning or late morning.
Depending on where you are, what time zone. But so thrilled to be here with you. I haven't seen you in a month of Sundays, as they say.
I know. You've been away and with the holidays and everything.
Yes.
So I've missed you very much.
I've missed you too, and I'm glad to be back here and so much to share today. So much going on in the world, and certainly a lot has been happening since we've been away, but we're back. And starting with a very impressive bill was signed into law by President Obama. And we're very excited about this.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about this because ACT Today has the ACT Today for Military Families campaign. And that was started to give financial relief to military families. And
in fact, Karen Driscoll worked with you guys for a long time.
She did, who was very instrumental in getting this bill passed with Autism Speaks. So Autism Speaks has kind of been taking the legislative side while we've been giving direct support to families.
Yes.
And I actually have a very exciting announcement that at the end of the year, right, like I think on the 30th of December, we received a beautiful donation of $100,000 for our ACT Today for Military Families.
Wow. Yeah. And so, was it anonymous, or can we say?
There's a name. I don't know if they want me to share it, but they just said to go to the program, so in whatever way we deemed fit. So there's lots of great things we can do with that, obviously, to help our military families.
Wonderful. How exciting.
So anyway, this is a very important piece of it because now Obama signed a bill that expands ABA care through Tricare. Coverage will apply to all Tricare beneficiaries with autism. Currently, the coverage is restricted to $36,000 per year, covering only 6 to 11 hours of therapy per week. Now, I know that number sounds kind of astronomical. $36,000 per year doesn't even cover the recommended amount of therapy, but that's just how expensive ABA is, as we all know.
Absolutely.
So what Obama has done is a one-year pilot program, and they're going to give greater coverage, and then they're going to review the program after 270 days to evaluate success. And there are no set limits for coverage at this point. So.
And we should also mention, too, that what this bill also does is that previously, if you were not active duty, what it meant was your child very likely wasn't eligible. So what you had was families in a situation, and correct me if I'm wrong,
that's
because
correct.
you know so many more of these families, but you had families that the mom or the dad was active duty and going over to Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever, and that it was a further drain on the family, but that was the only way that the child was eligible for ABA.
That's right, if they were in service. Now, then I think what was even more shameful, quite frankly, is that even if combat-related injuries caused them to leave the service, they were not covered for ABA coverage.
Absolutely unspeakable.
So, I mean, we had wounded warriors out there with children with autism who could no longer serve, who could not get ABA applied behavioral analysis, behavior therapy for their children.
Absolutely shocking. But at least for the moment, for 270 days, they're doing a trial.
Yes.
And that has been signed into law, and we're thrilled.
I
and
want to thank
congratulate
President. I want to thank Autism Speaks for spearheading that, and I'd like to thank our friend Karen Driscoll for all the work she's done behind the scenes. It was such an honor to work with Karen.
Yes.
I can't even get it out. Karen, while she was here. And I want to thank the President. I want to thank President Obama for doing this for our military families and for our children with autism.
And I have to say, too, you know, thank you to all of our representatives and senators for getting the bill, you know, done so that this can happen. A one-year trial, 270 days before they reevaluate, and hopefully we'll see that it's beneficial.
I'm sure
So
it will.
if you are in the military, make sure that you're taking advantage of it so that they can see not only for your family but for other families that this is worthwhile.
Yeah, and we're going to be trying to get the word out to all our military families that have applied for grants at Act Today that have not been able to receive grants yet.
Wonderful.
So we'll be doing a lot of postings on social media to let everybody know about this.
Absolutely great. And now, also in the news, we've had a couple of stories about families and
in crisis, really.
Yes, absolutely.
How many families in crisis out there? Almost every family with a child with autism.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I noticed, I get change.org sent to me, and I do a lot of signing of various petitions, because sometimes the causes are very worthy and really outrageous to think that certain people are being treated a certain way.
Yeah.
And so I saw one about a horseback riding center and a woman who started a therapy center for her son, and Julian, and she started this Parkwood Farms Therapy Center, and other children came in, but she could be forced to shut down her home and therapy center because the bank is threatening her with eviction. She was making all her mortgage payments until the bank sold her loan and her bills skyrocketed, and now her bills are double what they used to be. And what she would like to do is stop the eviction and modify her loan.
Right. She's not asking for a free ride.
No.
And that's
she's
the thing
asking
about
for a
this.
negotiation. And she said every day she sees kids with autism, and I've seen this myself, being a horse person and working, you know, having kids over to ride our horse. And I've seen many children improve from their relationship with animals. She's saying that she wants to keep this open, and she's been following the bank's instructions for 2 years, and she's facing eviction. So you can go on change.org and you can sign this petition. And actually another person signed it saying that they had a similar situation, and the Gearings, and they were able to save their home and family farm because they started a campaign which brought attention to the bank.
Right.
So there are many people behind this, and we need to have compassion on these situations.
Absolutely.
And the banks need to work with these people to figure out solutions so they're not out on the streets and their children with autism are suffering.
Absolutely. Sometimes it can just be a machine. The banks are just doing things and they're not taking into consideration. But again, we've seen in the past, change.org, sometimes it changes the bank's behavior, and then there's a conversation.
Right.
Which is what should happen.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Now, we have an exciting guest that's going to join us in just a few minutes, Doug Baker.
Doug Baker has been here before, but we didn't get a lot of time. We talked to him primarily about being the father of a young son with autism, how that changed his purpose in life, and how he is helping families with children on the spectrum really plan for the whole lifespan of the child and the family, and making sure they are taken care of financially and protected and secure, which is always lurking in our heads from the time our children are diagnosed and as rapidly as they grow. I cannot believe my son is 11, Jim is 9.
Right.
And it's all on our minds.
Right, absolutely. And the idea of what happens when we're not here. I know, when we ask, what's your biggest fear? A lot of times that's what parents will write back and say.
I'm an older parent, so
me too.
I'm older than you, girlfriend.
Just by like 7 seconds.
Right.
And
we're
both,
like a decade.
And we're no, it's not true. It's not true. And we both have husbands that are not spring chickens on the first time in the barnyard, and so there we have it. But the truth of the matter is that we all need to have a mind to what happens across the long term.
Yeah, it's scary, but you know what? Feel the fear, do it anyway.
Yes.
The greatest thing we have to fear is fear itself, right? As Roosevelt said. And we got to just dive in there. And Doug's going to today give us some really concrete ways. It's kind of a condensation of his presentation that he gives at conferences. So we'll hear that.
And as we go to break, we're going to be premiering a new episode of What's Left. This is the new cooking series that we have started with Lisa Ackerman from TACA.
Oh, I haven't seen this.
Do you remember when Lisa was here with us and she talked about she'd like to do some cooking segments?
Yes.
And she talked in particular about this macaroni and cheese that she made, and there was GFCF, and I said, "Oh, I'm sure
then I gotta know this."
I said, "I'm sure we can't have it. We're allergic to so many things. We couldn't possibly, Lisa." And Lisa kept on saying to me, "No, Shannon, I'm sure that you can have this. It's amazing. We can have it." And finally, we're debuting for you this recipe. It's so delicious. You have to try this with Wyatt. So, if those of you who are on restricted diets, when you tell people that your child doesn't have gluten, doesn't have casein, doesn't have soy, doesn't have, the list continues, they always say, "What's left?"
Yeah.
So that's what these segments are called, What's Left, and Lisa is going to show you. So without further ado, today, for the first time, macaroni and cheese with Lisa Ackerman from TACA, What's Left.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild. Let's get wild.
Hey, welcome back to Autism Live. We heard you. Everybody wants
macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, but we're going to make it allergy free. But here's what's the crazy part of this macaroni and cheese. It's actually healthy.
And it tastes good.
Yeah, it tastes really good.
That's the most important part.
So we're going to start. We got our water boiling. There's so many variations on the pasta. We're using today a corn pasta. We can verify with the manufacturer that we have a GMO-free product. So let's go ahead and put that in there.
Ooh,
and if you don't mind, stir that up for me, my friend.
Yeah, it's sticking a little bit to the bottom.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
We maybe add a little more high heat oil and spread that around again. One thing you gotta know about gluten-free pasta, if you overcook this, it becomes mush. Let's move this guy over to the other burner so you can see what I'm doing. And now we're gonna start with the old macaroni and cheese sauce. What's great is there's a lot of choices for, different soups. And the way that I look at soups, and again, please follow the recipe on your screen right now. I don't like to measure very often. But what I like to use is a creamy butternut squash soup. So this soup is great because it adds a lot of flavor to the dish, but also gives people another serving of vegetables. With kids, we don't want to over season. Maybe with the adults, we can season some for the kids first, pull it out, serve them, and then add a little more, you know, garlic powder or onion powder or other types of things into your dish. So the next most important thing on this recipe is we're going to add in a thickener and the faux cheese. Now some people like their sauce really thick, so you just add in more cornstarch or more arrowroot, so that's not a big deal. How's that doing? You think it's ready?
I think it's done.
Okay, so why don't we switch? I'll take that, you do that.
Okay.
And I'm going to strain this bad boy here. Here, let me turn that off.
Okay.
Or we're going to cause trouble again.
Trouble in Lisa's kitchen.
Yeah, no!
That's another show.
Don't, yeah, right? So I'm going to go ahead and get this all strained. It's a good consistency. So I'm going to check to make sure our pasta is cooked. So really you just want to make sure, just like any pasta, it's a little bit squeezy, a little bit. Nice. Dude, good job.
Hey.
We're good.
Looks yummy.
So even though the cheese is not totally melted, it's okay. Don't panic. What's important is that you're going to love this recipe once you eat it. What I enjoy most about this recipe is that it smells good, but this stuff is amazing. So if you don't mind, I'm going to serve you some up, and you can maybe blow a little bit on it so you don't burn your mouth. Sorry, I'm once a mom, always a mom.
Just like we tell our kids.
I know, right?
Oh, and I can't wait. I'm excited.
So I'm going to give a shot of this too, but
oh my gosh, that is so good.
This is the ultimate comfort food. So
oh, it's so
isn't
good.
it good?
And I'm not just saying that; it is really good. It literally tastes like something our kids would really like, and that sweetness is really, really, really good.
So the bonus for us is that when we're serving this to our kids, they're actually getting a full serving of vegetables in this. So instead of just eating a bunch of carbs and worthless calories, you're actually getting some good stuff in this. And we'll be back next time. I hope you join us again here on Autism Live. We're really loving the feedback, and if you have additional feedback, here's how you get it to us. You can send it to us via email at autismlive@gmail.com. On Facebook, facebook.com/autismlive. And also there's thousands of recipes waiting for you to discover them with pictures and different things on the TACA website. So you can hit TACA on the web, tacanow.org, and we'll be back. Hopefully we'll get to do this again.
I had so much fun.
Maybe we'll have a little wine, but you got to join us next time. We'll look forward to seeing you then.
Bye guys, we're gonna keep eating.
You say howdy, we say hi. Let's get rowdy, let's get wild. Let's get.
Okay, so this one.
Hi, we're on the air. Hi, Doug. We are back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And I have Doug Baker with me today. Hi, Doug. How are you today?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
And Doug, you've been on the show before.
Yes, I have.
But we just tapped the surface, I feel, the last time you were here, because we spoke a lot about how you came to work with supporting families by doing what you call, you are a lifespan special needs financial advisor.
Yes.
Okay? And we're going to get into what that means. But when you were here last, we spoke a lot about you being a dad of a son with autism.
Mm-hmm.
And your son is older now.
Almost 23.
Almost 23.
It's my 6'4", 11-year-old.
Okay. And we talked a lot about how your life really changed after that. You found a new purpose in working with families with children on the spectrum to help them get financial peace of mind, essentially, and to help navigate the process of what they need to do to plan ahead. So tell us how you do that.
Well, when I did my own planning, I found that there was really nobody out there helping us, look at our life and taking us down that path and putting their arm around us and saying, this is where you need to go, and this is who you need to see, and this is how you need to do this and how to do that and what works best for you. So that's where I kind of came up and said, hey, you know what, from birth through survivorship, there's so many changes that we need a lot of assistance. And I kind of really looked at the three fundamental foundations everything kind of boils down to in our lives we look for. We look for the financial well-being, our quality of life, and last but not least, our pursuit of health and happiness. And I've kind of modeled my program after
the financial well-being and the quality of life. That, you know, that health and happiness is an inner spiritual, whatever it is that you use, or outside influence that you use. I'm not a PhD psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything of that nature, so I'll leave that to those experts.
Okay.
But if I can help the family with 2 out of 3, that gives them that chance to better focus on that health and happiness.
Well, yeah, without those first 2 components,
Correct.
how
And
do
they're
you-
all interrelated.
They're
obviously.
all interrelated. I mean, as a family, if we're in stress over providing our child the services they need and the ability to thrive and survive,
Yes.
our health and happiness suffers, as we all know. That's where the stress comes in, and then we start to take on illnesses and
Sure.
various things. So, tell me, let's talk about how families can thrive in the special needs system, because I think what happens, speaking from the perspective of a mom with a child with autism, is once you get past the shock, the denial, the anger, then you're into acceptance, and then you start moving. You're so focused on getting services and getting your child better, what we call recovery. If we get, you know, if we get our child diagnosed young enough, we start all the things, the ABA therapy, possibly biomedical treatments, whatever paths we pursue.
The recovery machine, yes.
The recovery machine.
Yes.
And while we're doing the recovery machine, it's difficult, if not impossible, to focus on the future. Plus, you're kind of afraid to say...
You're exhausted.
You're exhausted.
We're exhausted as families. I see so many families that are at this point where they have so many things coming at them, they're overwhelmed. And I guess if I go back to those first 2 components of those, you know, that triangle foundation, I make those components easier for the families so they can focus on that health and happiness. First of all, we're all tired, so we have to kind of figure in our mind, we have to get over being tired. Because for most of us, 95% of us, we're going to have a special needs child for the rest of our life. And the recovery machine can take a lot of time, and obviously it takes a lot of money. And it's money typically out of our pockets instead of being provided for us. So it's helping families understand information. I kind of tell families, one of the things that help you is cluster yourself in groups, support groups. You do better in numbers in education and sharing information. And that's how most of our organizations actually started. Foothill Autism Alliance talks about meeting in the front of a room at one of the therapy clinics, and the parents started talking, and that's how they started. And that's where Philip Hain and all them got together and started, you know, doing the UD Bennett, moving that group. I mean, that's really common. There's a new a group in the South Bay where I live that it happens to be an Autism Society group, but it could have just been TACA, it could have been Generation Rescue, it could have been Autism Speaks, except they don't really have groups. And they're all 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20-year-old parents of kids that they're scared because this services cliff, and you know, everyone's used to the fiscal cliff. We have a services cliff.
Yes, we do.
22 in the state of California. It's 21 in other states, but they aren't. There's, you know, and the focus hasn't been on the adult stuff, and so that's the new battlefront for us. You know, when my son was young, by the time we got ABA and early intervention part of the program, he was 9. It kind of really passed him by. Now we're at a point where we're fighting this adult side, and it might be 5 or 10 years before we start seeing benefits from it, but it's families like yours and so forth that are coming through that will have benefits, and it's with service, the numbers don't work. With the service cuts that are happening legislatively, we're having probably 40% increase over the next 5 to 8 years, and funding's being cut about that much. So how do you handle that many more people in the system with a lot less money? So there's definitely some things that we have to do, and we can talk about circling our community and circling our money as we get further on in this talk.
Okay, so you're saying, let's review. Get over being tired, cluster in support groups, and ask the hard questions to demand answers from the agencies, meaning Regional Center, Department of Mental Health, Health Services, Social Security, and more. Make sure you're getting the maximum out of those.
Whatever your diagnosis and the benefit of the autism and the Down syndrome and the intellectual disabilities, these families, they have the Regional Center.
Right.
But the Asperger's don't. The mental health, which is our taboo world, doesn't, and that's really our biggest community. I mean, there's so many families out there. This whole thing that happened in Connecticut,
in Newtown,
has brought this to a head in regard to the lacking of services.
Right.
And there's I'm really big on LinkedIn, and boy, I'll tell you, the arguments and the discussions going on about guns. Should the gun control more mental? It's guns don't kill people. People kill people.
Yes.
Our lack of mental health services has been atrocious.
I spoke a lot about, I was on a lot of newscasts and in a lot of newspapers giving my take on the fact that, obviously we couldn't just say Asperger's was the cause, because generally Asperger's young people are not violent. I said they're more likely to discover the cure for cancer than do a mass shooting. So I wanted to dispel a lot of myths, but clearly there is a cliff where our kids, when they get older, I mean, this young man was just sitting at his parents' home getting nothing at the age of 22.
The interesting thing was his family was a pretty well-to-do family.
I know.
His mother, she earned quite a bit of money through her alimony, and they had access to the services.
But he wasn't getting them.
And but sometimes these higher functioning people, unless you can figure out a way to get them conserved, because they may not be taking their medication, they get off. I mean, there's a whole conservatorship process that happens in that world as well. It can be difficult for them, and they can be very bright. They can argue a good argument, and the courts can sit down and say, this person is very competent, they can take care of themselves.
Intellectually very competent.
He needed help, and now we've got to kind of reevaluate the system and see what we have to come up with.
Exactly. Okay. Let's take a break, and we're going to come back with talking about the education years.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
And then to talk about the adult years in terms of what you feel we're going to need to be aware of. And then trying to really help solve this problem and what individuals can do. Okay? All right. We'll be right back then.
My name is Rocky.
Autism used to affect 1 in every 10,000 children. Now it affects 1 in every 91 kids.
TACA is one of 5 organizations helping families living with autism today.
Our kids came back to life. There's a whole community out there, and now we're a part of it.
Oh, TACA has a place for me.
To find TACA, go to www.tacanow.org.
Please.
We are back with Doug Baker, who is here to talk with us about how he works with families, not only in the financial area, but advising them on how to utilize all of the various services that are out there to help your child, and how to build really a life program for your child. Would that be correct?
Correct. Your finances and your children aren't separate. And so what I did was I took my role as a special needs advisor, helping advise families in navigating the system, and merged it with financial advisor wealth management. And that's what I wanted when I was looking for services. So now it allows these people to kind of focus on where they're going to go in their life, and how they're going to be able to afford it, and how they're going to really live the life. The special needs trust and the life insurance policy, that's a great death plan, but we're talking a living plan. What is going to happen between here and there? And you and I have a good 30, 40, maybe 50 years going into that. But it's how's our quality of life, because if we're not taking care of ourselves first, we're no good to our family or our special needs child.
Okay.
So, yeah, let's education. What do we want?
Education.
understand, for these families, when they start out, and when we start on the early edges, understand what an assessment is. Understand how the assessment is going to affect your services in school. Get the independent evaluations and find out what the policies are. You want to get independent evaluations. How's the school going to pay for it? What are they willing to do with it? And how's it going to be used in regard to for your specific family's plan, not only the education side, but how you as a parent are being able to help manage your child as you're going forward.
So you're saying an independent assessment or evaluation is crucial?
Independent evaluation is the right of every family. I think usually it's done every 3 years, but it might be done 2 years. Just depends on the policy and the procedures of the different school districts. Demand accountability. Demand accountability out of your IEP team. IEP is not restricted to once a year. Some families get in that that mode like it's once a year.
Right.
They have to set it up according to your plans. When we started back in the 90s, in the early 90s, we didn't know our rights.
Right.
We didn't have the advocates.
Right.
And so today there's so much information out there, and there's so much stuff you can find on the internet, which we didn't have back in the early 90s either. It can almost be overwhelming. So the concept is you have to take a focus. You have to keep your head about you, but ideally you want to cooperate with the school system because they're the ones that are trying to take the best care of your child. Some are better than others, and that's where you got to go back in and demand the accountability. Stay on the regional center or Department of Mental Health on a regular basis. While they're in school, there's still a behavior modification program that can take place. And I've got many families that they come home from school and their kids may have a couple of hours of ABA, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days a week.
Provided by regional center.
Provided by regional center. A lot of people kind of forget that process. They say, well, after 3, it's the school's problem. No, not the behavior side. And so
stay on your regional center.
Or your Department of Mental Health in regard to what services they're going to be able to provide for your child. And then you're going to get, Wyatt's 11.
Right.
And it just seemed like he was 6.
Right, it sure did.
My son's 23. He's been out of the school system for a year now, and it just seems like he was 6 to me. At 14, start your transition plan.
Now, tell me definition.
Well, the transition plan is starting to build skills for independent living. It's actually called an independent transition plan, or I'm sorry, individual transition plan that goes inside the IEP. By law, it's supposed to be in place at 16 years old. But you can start incorporating the transition plan at 14. There's some great online tools. I mean, on my Facebook resource page, I've got 2 or 3 people that have phenomenal pages providing information on the resource planning process, having to do with transitions. So that's a great area to kind of get started. Because once you start hitting 14, a lot of things the dominoes start falling. 16, get them evaluated by the Department of Rehab for driver's ed training. It doesn't matter if your child will never drive a car in their life. That's a great way to engage in Department of Rehab before they're 18, because everyone pushes you off to 18.
That's a very good
You were entitled
to get in there early.
So you get in the Department of Rehab early. Now the Department of Rehab is going to come after me and say, "Hey, you got too many people coming after us." That's their job. They're supposed to be doing this.
Yes. So and you say. Conservatorship, guardianship?
Well, when they turn 18, you've got all sorts of things to think about. And before they turn 18, you've got the idea for supplemental security income, SSI. You have to think about the legal aspect of your child. Is the power of attorney going to work, or conservatorship? That's a very personal decision. I'm not very comfortable having a court system in my life, but some kids, you don't have a choice. And then you can get to the other side, the real high-functioning ones that have an independence about them, but they don't, and they can't really manage themselves. But they are smart enough to be able to tell an attorney, I know what I want, I know where I'm at. And it could be a fight in the court. So you have to think about your benefits, protecting benefits that are for these kids, and that goes to the grandparents. If there's money, I had a family come in after one of my seminars 6 months ago, and they had a 20-and-a-half-year-old daughter that had graduated from high school, had Asperger's but autism, was at a junior college, and their regional center caseworker said, "Gee, your grandparents left, or your daughter for the grandparents was left $200,000 for an education, and if you put that in a special needs trust, she would be allowed to get benefits, Medi-Cal and SSI." So I explained to them that they had to do a first-party special needs trust, and there's a whole another discussion with first-party, third-party.
Yeah.
But they had to do a first-party special needs trust, and then they had to do any money going forward you wanted to put in a third-party trust so that wasn't ever touched by the daughter. And that's exactly what they did. They went and saw the attorney, and that's what the attorney did.
Okay.
So you've got to think about all those, you know, the SSI, the Medi-Cal, then SSDI. For when one of the parents retires, SSI turns into SSDI, which is more money. I think Wyatt, you know, is on SSDI now.
Yes.
You know, there's just a lot of things to think about. And then, what is it? It's 22. They end the school system. So what comes next?
The adult
it's
years.
Housing. It's employment. You know, and
so this is daunting to me because I see what a lot of our organizations, our advocacy groups, our nonprofits and foundations in this area are doing, the work they are doing, and I think we're all sort of going, we're not doing enough for the adults, and what's going to happen. What are some of the changes you've seen that look promising in this area?
Well, legislation is looking at, the California legislation is looking at bringing whatever new type of monies that are going to be available. They're really going after the adult services because there's such a large group of us that fought the early fight. Now we got our new fight. We got our, I think this is our third wind.
Okay.
And you're going to see the demand and services are there. These kids have the ability to improve and learn more. My son, you know, I need to get him more education training so he can get his GED, potentially to go forward. He has the ability to learn. He just doesn't learn at the same level that you and I can.
Of course.
You and I can learn I can learn some things very quickly in a very short amount of time. It might take him 5 times the amount of time. But he has that ability to improve, and he's shown it, and I've seen it, and I've worked with him on it.
Of course.
So there's got to be services going forward, and you know, I was just talking to one of our providers, Laura Roberts, who runs ABC down in the South Bay, and she's got a pretty severe son that doesn't, you know, read or write very well.
Right.
Laura's been providing ABA therapy for a lot of years because she wanted some great services, and you know, she was talking about their concern about what are they going to do with their son, where he's going to be, and because he can never really probably work.
Right.
But he could be in a care program, a daycare program, to give him continuing education, and maybe some of the people that work in that program could be assistants, could be high functioning autism because they work pretty well, or it could be a Down syndrome person that has pretty good capabilities. So there might be ways of employment of that nature. I mean, one of the attorneys at one of my seminars was talking about a bike company that all these high-end bikes were made by all disabled people.
Yeah.
And it was a high quality, and the repetitive motion didn't bother them.
No, we're finding more and more.
Their craft of doing that work was great.
We found that there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there with their own children on the spectrum or have other developmental delays that are starting companies specifically geared. We talked to a family that owns a bookstore back east that only hires people on the spectrum.
Correct.
There's a Danish entrepreneur who's coming to America that's been using kids on the spectrum in computer programming and having enormous success with that. So we do know those entrepreneurs are out there, and we obviously support that and urge that.
One of the keys, I think, is many of these, in this high unemployment environment, a lot of our families, the parents, need employment. I mean, you know, you were at the conference at Autism Society last January, a year ago, where that whole came up, and I kind of stood up and said, hey, look, you know, with this unemployment, I think the parents is more important that they can help support their kids.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the model that I'm building as I go forward, you know, siblings or parents that can become advisors like me, financial advisors, and you know, with the special needs assistants, and to understand and live this life. I plan, that's my whole growth mechanism, is bringing on younger families like that, because you know, there's no retirement for me. I love this. I could win the lottery and $100 million tomorrow.
And you'd still do
I'd still be doing this because it's a passion.
Okay.
And it's what I love to do. But I need to bring on some 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm 55 this year. I need to bring on younger people to follow that generation, to follow that survivorship, to follow those families. And you know, it's about supporting our own community because, you know, right now we're invisible. Our legislation, we've got great voices. There's no money. We don't know where it is, and it's sitting in the big Wall Street financial institutions that don't identify us. And that's, you know, there's a whole nother discussion on how we need to kind of start circling our money, start supporting the organizations that support us, and not giving our money to these organizations that are whining and dining those legislators out there that are voting against our services for mental health or autism, not giving us extra money, but they're forwarding their own banking agenda and kind of getting that whole thing done at their benefits, nothing for our community.
Not benefiting our families. Now, you have something here that I thought was very interesting, and I said to my husband this morning, I'm cutting this out, and I'm putting it on maybe the refrigerator, or I don't know, maybe I should keep it in my wallet. You say, look in the mirror and ask yourself, who will benefit from the money I spend today? Do that every time you pull out your cash, credit card, or checkbook.
Checkbook, that's kind of going away too, isn't it?
Yeah. So that piece of advice, I mean, that's motivated
What
by...
that means is every day we choose where we spend our money.
Yes.
And every day you walk into Chase or Bank of America or one of these big organizations that just don't care. I mean, I was with one of them for a while and did all my training, and you know, you can see that on my LinkedIn page or whatever. The fact is, they didn't care. They didn't have. There was no conscious of you know, just bringing money. They
bringing money from
I'm
the
sorry,
special
you
needs
can't.
families.
You can't refer. Yeah, you can't refer an attorney. You can't refer a special needs trust attorney. You can't do. They kept telling me what I can't do, and I kept telling them what we need to do for this community.
Okay.
So I had to take my ball and go elsewhere and build my model. And realistically, it's those that support us are there. We make a choice. I make a choice every day that I'm not going to buy Chinese-made products if I can avoid it, because I want to support my country. I want to, you know, or another country besides China, because they're kind of trying to take over. So I don't believe in that. So when I can, I will avoid a Chinese product if there's an alternative. Plastic laundry basket, I can't find it. Okay. Sometimes you can't find shoes that aren't made in China or assembled in China.
But how do we find businesses that support our group? Well, you know, our community. How do we find them?
We could go easy to the local community businesses, the banks, and you know, some of these local and regional banks. I mean, they're much more in tune to the community. They've got more of our members working there, and they give you better service. Okay. Plus, you know, you start finding people, the restaurants that are run by special needs, the car repair shops, the floral shops, whatever you kind of go down the line, we need to start identifying ourselves more. I mean, I get in a room, and I often, you know, when I do a presentation, I might start the presentation on introduce yourself and what kind of business you're in.
Well, do we have any sort of database for these businesses? I mean, I know there's an Angie's List that gives you services. Why don't we do something like that? You're the person.
You know, I'm a catalyst. I'm trying to, you know, I'm still trying to make a living out here too.
Well, this is a good idea we came up with today. Somebody's got to come up with a list of businesses that support.
And it should start inside of our groups. And, you know, in our associations, we should start, you know, finding out what people do, so everyone knows what, you know, if somebody's a restaurateur or a wine connoisseur, or somebody's manufactures widgets at a certain local place, or somebody owns a sporting goods store, or, you know, so forth. You know, we still listen. I've got somebody that's a client that's working for one of those big bad behaving banks, and he's got a pretty severe, you know, person on the spectrum, and he's been doing this for a lot of years. He has no idea, because he's never been involved in his family's special needs side of the life. He's always been involved in his own, the real world business, where, you know, we come out of our cave and we go to work in the real world, and we go back to our cave when nobody knows what, you know, that we live this life, you know, 7x24.
Right.
So,
for our viewers today, who probably have, I would say the majority of them have younger kids, and they're just starting this process. They're involved in trying to get, obviously, the best behavior therapy, the best education for their children. What are the things they can be thinking about now and should be doing for the future?
It's funny, I was at UCLA Resnick, and I did a presentation, and every family was under 8 years old. Some of them had 2-year-olds. And I said, you know, I made the comment that one of the best things you can do when your child's first born, obviously before they're diagnosed. Down syndrome, you know you're born with it, but autism and mental illness are these surprise, they all of a sudden come on and we pray that they go away all of a sudden.
Yes.
But somewhere before 6 months, you could get a very inexpensive growing life insurance policy.
Okay.
Not that I'm a big life insurance guy, but for $100 or $110 a month for life, for putting in $80,000 or $75,000, in 65 years, that policy would be worth almost $1 million. Just the way it grows.
Astounding.
And so people say, well, I've already got my kids. Well, if you're having another one, just, and put, because that could make a great back end for a special needs trust at some point in time. And it would be a policy on the child. But so so as you're looking forward, it's helping people no more gotchas. Oh gosh, what's the next surprise that they're going to throw at me? There's so many isolated therapies and so forth that, and I try to work with a lot of these organizations, and everyone's kind of protective of their families, and they think that their process is the end all in life, but it's just kind of a I have a chart I use. If there's one thing I use in my whole presentation, I don't know if you can put it up on the TV, but
I think Emily might be able to get it up.
I have this great chart. Then
Let's see, Emily, can you get that chart up?
Yeah, what this does is if I spent my presentation talking, I could talk a 2-hour presentation on this one page.
Okay.
And basically, I've simplified it, and this is based on the California system because of the regional center, but this chart could go across the country. When you start, you're born, you've got early diagnosis, you get early intervention, you got your first IEP, you just kind of go all the way through. There's so many commonalities, but there's so many things that are different. All of our kids go to kindergarten, right? It doesn't matter if you're special needs or not. All of our kids go through puberty. It doesn't matter if you're special needs or not.
Right.
All of our kids turn 18.
Right.
But we've got, and those are that's just showing a couple of the minor points. There's so many other things that the therapies, the OT, the speech therapy, your ABA or RDI or PRT or floor time or whatever it is. So, what it does is as part of my presentation on the key ages and stages for these families, the strategic lifespan is showing these families what are these different stages and what are the different modules that are moving in each one. Because we change. I mean, our kids go to grade school for 6 grades, and then they go to middle school maybe for 2 or 3 grades, and then they go to high school. And then after high school, it might be junior college. And then, I mean, my goal would be in a couple of years, and it's still my goal, and I think I said this, is get my son over to Marshall University in West Virginia, because they've got this great 2-year program. And so then, then after that, where do we go? And it's just helping them along and providing the services. So.
Okay. Now, you've got some conferences coming up, don't you?
I do stuff for Friendship Circle in the South Bay. We've got a really large group that ends up showing up there, usually 40 or 50 people at a time. I have a presentation on these strategies for surviving and thriving in the special needs system on services and agencies and how the funding and insurances will work. That's coming up on the 16th.
Where is that now?
That's in the Friendship Circle in the South Bay. It's, I think, gotfriends.com is their website and so forth. I'm doing, I think, Autism Conferences of America. They just kind of gave me a small slot here. I don't, they haven't confirmed it, but it looks like I'm going to be speaking there in March.
But how do people, can they go to your website?
Yes, my Facebook page is the best page.
Best page, okay, and that is?
It's facebook.com/special needs advisor.
Special needs advisor, /
I think, in fact, she's got it there on the bottom of the screen for us.
So if there are organizations out there that wish to have you present, if there are families that wish to talk to you individually about devising a plan for their families and come to you for advice, you're available.
Yeah, I'm starting to get, people are starting to email me off Facebook or, my direct email, and they're starting to say, okay, I like your ideas on what you're planning. What do we need to do next? Well, let's sit down and talk about your personal situation. There's no fee to sit down and meet with me.
Okay, but you do a consultation.
Yeah, I help families kind of plan their stuff out and focus where we can get for their whatever legal or whatever things going, estate planning and special needs trust, whatever makes sense.
Right. Well, thank you for doing the work you do, and this is a service that is so badly needed right now, and we don't want to put our heads in the sand about these issues.
You got to face the music at some point in time.
You do. We're all in this together, and we have to face it, not be in denial. And so thank you for joining us today. I think Shannon's going to come back to say goodbye for the end of the show.
Currently, in the United States, 1 in 88 children is affected by autism. 1 in 88 means something different when your child is the one. Recovery is possible. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, host of Autism Live, an online show about autism broadcast by CARD, the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I'm also the mother of a child with autism, my beautiful son, Jem. You know our old joke, guess what?
Chicken butt.
Chicken butt. So we're going to take the chickens. But things weren't always so easy. I remember when Jem was first diagnosed with autism. I used to lay awake at night in bed and pray for someone or something that could help us to get our child back. My prayers were answered by Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh and the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD treats autism and other related disorders using the principles of ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis, which is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. It is also recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the U.S. Surgeon General. About a year after we started treatment with CARD, we were able to see tremendous improvement, and we got our child back.
What grade are you in?
Second.
You are a smart cookie, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Do you like school?
Yeah.
Do you have any good friends?
Yeah, Oscar.
Oscar is your best friend?
Yeah.
And my child is just one of thousands to benefit from CARD ABA therapy. Across the nation and around the world, children are making amazing progress and being given the keys to unlock their full potential.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Did you have some glasses?
Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
I have 2 children with autism. I can't imagine a day without CARD or the therapists. They've been so instrumental in helping us with our kids and shaping their lives and helping us help them.
Thank you, Christina Big Alex.
Thank you, Jackie and Mariana.
We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
Recovery from autism is absolutely a possibility. We've been recovering children for over 20 years. It's just a matter of identifying the child's medical needs, understanding the child's sensory issues, and then teaching the child all of the skills they need in order to function normally.
We know there's hope for autism. Autism is treatable, and recovery from autism is possible. Welcome back. I just had a great interview. Thank you so much.
Doug has such great information, and it's things that we tend to put off and we need to tackle and research and learn about now.
And important. But we're out of time.
Yeah, we are.
I want to thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
We'll be back next week.
Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
I have to start working out.
Okay, mine are live, laugh, and love myself.
I love that. I'm going to borrow that.
Live in the moment, laugh, love myself.
And we're going to talk more about resolutions the rest of this week. So we'll be back next week with Nancy. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug for me.
And have a great day.
Bye-bye.